Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation. The pack is back. We are going to do a show on what is the best Van Halen album. Joe B, welcome back, my friend.
Good to be on, Peter, as always.
John C, John Clauser, welcome back.
Well, thank you, mate.
And John the Music Nut, hello, my friend.
Hello, Peter. Great to be here.
Fantastic. So what we are going to do is pick our favorite two Van Halen albums, explain why. We may even throw an honorable mention. So without further ado, I'm going to go to you, Joe. What's your number two pick for your favorite Van Halen album?
Okay, my number two pick. So it's not, it's like picking your favorite child because all the David Lee Roth era albums are great, aside from Diver Down. Was really pissed off about that album, and the original tunes are great, but the way too many covers. My number two pick, though, my two picks had a lot of impact on me, and my number two is this one, this gem, A Different Kind of Truth. And the reason I picked this, well, first of all, when you first heard Tattoo, everybody was slagging on it, and I picked up the CD, put it in. And I'm like, you know what? The more I listen to it, the song is really good. But then you get into the album and it just is incredible. It's all old demos, right? That they reworked with new lyrics. And I'm like, why have they been sitting on this great catalog of music for all these years? This is with David Lee Roth. This is 2012. The reason this album means so much to me is right after it was released, I actually bought tickets for their tour and everything. I found out I needed to have a valve replaced in my heart. So I needed open heart surgery. And that was late February 2012. So I have a nice scar right here. It's going on, 11 years. I go to my checkup on August 7th at University of Chicago. God bless you guys. You saved my life. But this got me through the surgery. I listened to this in the hospital. I listened to this constantly during recovery, and it just grew on me, and it just got me through. It was this album that just was the album of the year for me, and it just helped me get through my heart surgery. So it meant a lot to me. It really did. And I wound up going to see him in San Jose, California, after I was fully recovered, and it was a great show. But that's my number two pick because it got me through my heart surgery. That's all. That's pretty big. Yeah.
Look, thank you for sharing that, Joe. And that is a fantastic album. And it
was a bicuspid. I like to explain to people about heart surgery. It was something I was born with, so it wasn't a heart attack or anything. It was a bicuspid aortic valve, and I had to have I have a cow valve in my. I had to do the choice between an organic or a prosthetic, and I got a cow valve in my heart. I'm doing great. It's just something I was born with, and a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger had the surgery. There's a lot of famous people that had that surgery, but this really got me through it. So that's my number two pick.
Well, it certainly would have got your heart racing, because listening to some quality music would have got my adrenaline pumping.
It's one of those albums where it just keeps on kicking ass, and then towards the end you got Stay Frosty, Out of Space, Big River. It's just great shit, great stuff. So
no, they were back. Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that. JC, what's your number two pick?
Well, my number two might surprise some folks. No, it's not Van Halen 3. When this album came out in the early, I think it was like 91. Front or Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. It kind of, I don't know. I played the heck out of it back then. I don't know why. I think I was kind of into 5150 a little bit. And then this was just kind of nice to hear Alex on real drums instead of a bunch of triggers and electric drums for the most part. But I don't know, I was just listening to this just now, and Eddie's playing was just ferocious on this album. There was a lot of poppy stuff, but boy, when he gets into the solos, there was still some really good shredding stuff. He may have stole the electric drill thing from Paul Gilbert and Racer X and Mr. Big and stuff like that, but on Pound Cake. But Pound Cake is still a great opening track. Judgment Day's fun. Spanked has got a goofy, funky rhythm, but it works so well. Run Around and Pleasure Dome. All of the songs, I don't know. It was just at the right time for me, and it was a really good album. I actually liked it. Right now, there was something meaningful to me about the song at the time. So I'm going with a little Van Hagar.
Okay.
Little carnal knowledge.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Nicely said, John. Nice. John, the music nut. What have you got for us? Number 2.
Well, I'm going to go back to the beginning.
In the beginning?
Not Shout at the Devil. Van Halen 1. This is one of those albums that when this came on the scene, it was like it changed everything. It was like, holy crap. It didn't sound like anything at that time. It still holds up tremendously. 10 million buyers in the US alone can't be wrong. It's a fantastic album. The songs that most people know are the cover of You Really Got Me, which they did a fantastic version of. And of course, the guitar solo Eruption that leads right into it, which is spectacular to this day. Running with the Devil, huge on AOR, Ain't Talking About Love, huge on AOR. The deep cuts are what make it the classic that it is. One of my favorite songs by Van Halen is I'm the One. I'm the One is fantastic. I love that relentless pace, and then it goes into the a cappella with ba 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 shooby doo wah ba boom ba 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 shooby dooby dooby doo wah, and then each one another voice comes in. It's excellent. I love the near punk of On Fire and Atomic Punk. I think Feel Your Love Tonight is wonderful and joyous. Little Dreamer is more laid back and chill, but it's killer. Cover of Ice Cream Man is awesome. Fantastic album. Loved it since I've bought it, and will always love it. That's my number 2 self-titled debut from Van Halen.
Nice. Does the cassette still play well?
Yes, it still plays. It still plays. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. You can still read the songs on it too. A lot of times you can't, but on this one you can.
Yeah. Look, I think frankly all of my cassettes went into landfill somewhere. But anyway, they're making a comeback, folks.
Some of mine did, but not all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I kept that. Anyway, good stuff. Well, I actually had this cassette of my number 2 pick. It was the quintessential summer album that I played with the lads when we used to go to the beach. This was a big hit in Australia, big hit in America. It's their other diamond certification album, and I'm talking about 1984. I love this album, and I think this is the perfect balance between commercial and rock, hard rock. And I was playing it last night, and the joys and I get out of this album are actually in the deep cuts. The deep cuts just absolutely rock. Drop Dead Legs, House of Pain. That's got one of the most evil, dirty riffs, and Eddie's just on fire.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the commercial stuff. The Hot for Teacher. Alex's playing is sublime. This is what Alex's drums should sound like. Not 5150, but Ted Templeton had the Alex drum sound to a T. This is what his drum sound should sound like. Fantastic lyrics. Now, we've got to talk about David Lee Roth's lyrics. He is a smart lyric writer. He's funny. And it's not often that you hear a rock song that you have a laugh and a chuckle. Hot for Teachers just, full of double entendres. It's fun. Panama and Jump, that was their big hit. That guitar solo conquered America. It conquered Australia. It's the perfect balance between you've got a little bit of synth pop and then you've got a little bit of hard rock. It's just the sweet spot. And, like when we're going to be looking at encyclopedia of hard rock in 150 years, we're going to be long gone. If they look at Van Halen, this album and these songs will be referenced. So I think it's got to, amount to something. The playing is great. Van Halen, 1984. And that's my number 2 pick.
Nice.
All righty. Dun, 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 dun. Joe B, number 1.
All right, my number 2 pick once again. So here we go. It's Women and Children First. And it probably is my favorite Van Halen album. But again, there's a backstory to this. First of all, these are the coolest mother effers ever. This picture, I wanted to look like these guys when I bought it. So I'm a sophomore in high school. I make the basketball team. My first practice, I break my leg. So I'm out for the year. And then my dad's telling me I'm worthless. I can't, I'm struggling. That's where when the Cradle Will Rock comes in. Have you seen Junior's grades? So anyway, I listened to this album in sports radio, which was just coming into vogue in Chicago. Every night I studied my ass off. I made the honor roll. I recovered from my broken leg. But this album I listened to just about daily to get me through my recovery and through my studies. And it's just awesome. The pictures on the album are awesome. Like I said, this is the coolest the band has ever looked, in my estimation. They just look like I wanted to look like that, right? And the songs. Here's Toro Toro is a beginner, and the Cradle of Rock was a great song for the radio. Romeo Delight is awesome, and they opened up with it on a lot of the tours. And it's just an awesome song. Fools is even heavier. Simple Rhyme is beautiful. I have a feeling that Eddie played a lot of bass on this album because some of the bass licks are really, I don't know, they don't sound like Michael Anthony. Loss of Control and Could Be Magic are kind of crazy songs, but Take Your Whiskey Home with the acoustic blues, so cool. And then you talk about the lyrics. I think one of the greatest lyrical out of all this David Lee Roth's great lyrics is Everybody Wants Some. It's just so cool that they have Alex's drum beat and he's got the jungle rhythm in there and it just goes all together. It's perfection. So that's my number 1 pick for Van Halen. Women and Children First. Got me through my broken leg. I made the honor roll. I proved my dad wrong. So, and the Cradle of Rock, those lyrics really hit home to me. And that's it. So there's my number 1 pick.
I really like your take on that, Joe. And I think a lot of people just may forget how much of an impact that Van Halen had made to so many people. And there's so many sort of stories, they can remember, I was listening to this song in this event at this particular time. It brings you back to a certain place and a time. And look, let's talk about the band. Like David Lee Roth is the prototype lead singer. Now, if it wasn't for David Lee Roth, he wasn't the greatest singer, but he was so damn charismatic. He is the ultimate frontman. And if you take David Lee Roth out of that band, then there's a whole genre of hair metal that disappears. I think he described it that he was responsible for a lot of bastard childs of, children in the hair metal genre. You wouldn't have Vince Neil. You wouldn't have Bret Michaels. I know I'm having a little bit of a rant here, but this band is so damn influential. And Eddie Van Halen, that whole, the creation of his guitar and the finger tapping and the technique, the prototype for so many guitarists in the 80s. This band is so damn influential.
There's a guy on YouTube. His name's Ben Eller, and he gives guitar lessons, but he's super technical. But he could not figure out how to play on Diver Down. I'm blanking on the song. But anyway, he slows down the tape, and he said no one has picked the guitar like Eddie does on that song because he slowed it down. He said no other guitarist has done that. He's so original. It's so Eddie, Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is the song I'm thinking of. He said he could play it, but he knew he wasn't picking it right. And he had to slow it down super slow to break down. And he said no one picks like that.
Yeah. And Eddie couldn't read music. It's all in here. Genius. Anyway, JC, what's your number 1 pick?
All right. Well, this this album was my gateway to Van Halen. I was probably 12, so I didn't get to hear some of the early Van Halen as it was coming out. I just wasn't exposed to that. But I came across some magazines like 16 and Rockline. I saw they had Kiss in it, and which I was still a Kiss fan. I was still coming out of that. But I started reading through some of these magazines, and I was, I wonder who this Van Halen group is. So they had a new album coming out, and I was like, I put it on my Christmas list, and sure enough, I got this album for Christmas. Yeah, it's still my absolute favorite Van Halen album to this day. There's nothing like that original Brown sound that you get on Fair Warning. Man, that opening intro to Mean Streets, I'm like, what is that? 12-year-old me is listening to this thing, and I'm like, what? I didn't even know what it was. I couldn't figure out what it even was. Then you get this slimy, greasy slide groove of Dirty Movies. You get that in your face, fast center swing. You get this slowed down, hear about it later. You get Unchained. You get a little Push Comes a Shove. You get So This Is Love with that little kind of jazzy, upbeat, jazzy feel. And then you get sledgehammered with Sunday Afternoon in the Park. Yeah, I don't care if that's just synth. That Alex's drum thing is just bludgeoning. And then you get the little 1 foot out the door just to finish it out. But man, that was just what an introduction I had to Van Halen was Fair Warning. And that will, to this day, will always be, I don't care if it's 30 minutes long. It's a great album. It is an absolute great album. And it just tells some great stories in the lyrics. That was one thing Dave could always do, is he could tell some really good stories. Granted, you're right. Maybe he may not have been the best singer in the world, but boy, you couldn't touch him on Fair Warning. That was just amazing.
Yeah, look, well said, John. I thought your head was going to explode then for a moment, but
I had to wake myself up.
I think you did. No, well done, mate. Seriously, David Lee Roth, charisma times 100. He's just the ultimate front man. And if I had a time machine, I would have loved to have gone back in the era and seen, circa 1980 to 81. And fantastic. Well said, mate. John, the music nut. What do you
Come
have?
on, Dave, give me a break. Hey, one break coming up. Fair Warning.
I have to look at that, mate, because that's a twofer.
Yes. Remember twofers.
Yeah. Are you sitting on the fence? Are you choosing two or just one?
I'm choosing Fair Warning as my number one.
Okay, there you go.
Fair Warning. The hangover to the party that was women and children first. What a spectacular album. I co-signed with my co-captain, John Clauser. Fair Warning. Wonderful album. I love the darker tone of this album. On this album, Eddie wanted more control. He was going back to the studio late night and coming up with some great stuff. And Dave is a star here, but he's not as big a star as he was on the albums before. This is more Eddie's album. Unchained, which I referenced before, is fantastic. I love Push Comes to Shove. I think that's my favorite bass line from Michael Anthony. Fantastic, creative, very funky and deep. Love that track. Love Sinner Swing. One of the first songs I ever heard the F word on in the verse. Excellent track. So This Is Love's excellent track. 1 Foot Out the Door. That's a pretty heavy song that's carried by the synthesizer. I mean, and of course, Mean Street is amazing. That intro is spectacular. Wonderful lyric on that. Wonderful delivery. Excellent. Hear About It Later. I love the laid back songs. The more mid-tempo stuff from the David era, I think is awesome between Hear About It Later and Little Dreamer that I mentioned off the first album. But yeah, Fair Warning has been it's been my favorite for a long time. It's the thing with Van Halen is their stuff with David, those first four in particular, and 1984. They're so strong. It's like choosing between your children. I mean, there's so much to recommend on every one of those, but Fair Warning is my favorite, and there it is, right there. 1980. Yeah.
No worries. Well, I wouldn't have cared if you picked both of those, the twofer, because they're damn strong. And
That's right.
yeah, that's a good cassette, two for the price of one, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. From when RCA Music Service, I picked this up. I think I was in 11th grade.
Yeah.
A lot of mileage out of this baby.
No, the good old days where they used to get cassette packs 2 for 1 or albums 2 for 1. Oh, that's great.
There you go. Nice.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Well, my number one, I'm going to go for Van Halen, the debut. I think it's one of the best debuts ever. It was, I think, one of those albums that you heard and you go, what the hell was that? There was nothing like it in 1978. It was really, somebody had put a shotgun across the bow of rock. And, this was like a complete band. So, there are some bands where they record their first album, second album. They sort of recorded this album, but they were kind of complete. The sound was there. Jamie's Crying, You Really Got Me, Eruption. They're all classics. And one thing we've got to really talk about is the fine production of Ted Templeton. The separation of the instruments, all the production is just really sparkly. That a lot of the later Van Halen, kind of missing that. But I think, Van Halen 1 from 1978 is one of the greatest debut albums of all time. And, Eddie had really reinvented rock guitar. And this was the album that just put Van Halen on the map. And whether, Joe, Kiss discovered them or not, we could have another show about this. There's a lot of debate about it. But for whatever it is, we're all lucky that we were able to get, this album, Van Halen 1. But Fair Warning was very much in my mix. That was kind of on the bubbling under list. Maybe I'll go around the grounds. Are there any other albums that you want to just do a shout out as an honorable mention that, kind of were in consideration for the top two or near the top? Joe?
Well, all of them. Like I said, all the Roth albums aside from Diver Down could be number one. If I'd have to go with, I'd have to go with the debut. Especially the way you talked about it perfectly. It was just such a game changer. When you heard Eruption and you really got me on the radio, you're like, holy cow, what is this? And I was the guy who bought it. And then everybody at school and on my block had to borrow it. And of course, some idiot scratched it. So I had to cut more lawns to buy another copy. But it's one of the greatest debuts of all time. It's just an amazing album. But I love Fair Warning. And I love 1984. It's the reason I made these picks were because of what they actually meant to me.
Yes, and I appreciate that
because the content is just such there. It's such a great run for the band, but their comeback with Different Kind of Truth really blew me away as well.
So strong.
For my honorable mention, I'm definitely going with the debut.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like, Fair Warning is such a dirty album, and I say dirty in a good sense. It's just so grimy, and I kind of think it's their answer to the new wave of British heavy metal. Maybe Van Halen were looking at what was happening across the transatlantic, and okay, so let's double down and let's do an album that's just rocks, because it wasn't one of their most commercial albums. It didn't sell as well, but it's one of those albums that has been critically appraised over time. And I think a lot of fans and a lot of critics put that in their top three. But it just rocks. JC.
Well, not to sound redundant, I probably would say the debut as well, but I think if you had asked me this about 30 years ago, I probably might have said Diver Down. Again, after Fair Warning, I was a Van Halen fan, so I just kept on going with what they were coming out with, and Diver Down was no exception. And I liked it at the time. It hasn't aged well. That's probably why I didn't want to pick it, but I will at least give it some props. I liked their version of Where Have All the Good Times Gone. I had a weird thing where I would that would be like the last song I would listen to before the new year would kick in. Don't know why. I was a goofy kid, but I liked. I thought Pretty Woman was fun. Yeah, it was fun at the time. But like Joe said, it hasn't aged well. It's not done well. So I'll at least give some Diver Down some love. But if I was really going to talk some, yeah, the first one. But you guys have said a lot of great things about the first one. So
yeah,
there you go.
Appreciate that, JC. I actually put a poll on YouTube with Rock Daydream Nation asking the folk to pick their favorite Van Halen album. And this is as of 24 hours since I put it up. The Van Halen debut is running at 33% of the audience. And number 2 is Fair Warning with 28%. So I think it might be a tussle between those two bands. It'll be interesting to see in a week's time where that the figures run down to. John the Music Nut, what about you? Any other honorable mentions you want to pitch in?
Well, my honorable mention is my co-captain on the boxing show that I used to do with Mr. Joe Beck, and that is Women and Children First. David, his charisma, I think, was never more apparent than here. Just listen to Everybody Wants Some. What a spectacular song. I mean, just that rumble in the beginning before it goes into the guitar lines, and then David does his thing. He just puts on a show on this track. I love Fools. Romeo Delight is amazing. I love Could This Be Magic? I loved when they would take a left turn. Fantastic song. I love the chorus on that. And I love Take Your Whiskey Home. And In a Simple Rhyme is as close as they would get to a ballad with David. But what a spectacular track, spectacular closer. Of course, Loss of Control is like a minute and a half of mayhem that they could never have done with Sammy. And I mentioned that on our last Van Halen show. But yeah, Women and Children First is a killer. And at one point, it was my favorite Van Halen record. But now it would be third. But those first 3 are so close. There you go.
Yeah, nice. Interesting. None of us have given Van Halen 2 a rap. That's a fine album too.
It is.
It's not shabby. It's not shabby.
Women in Love is a great song. And yeah, it is. It's a great album.
It's just that their discography is so strong. It's like the Dead Sea Scrolls, that all the David Lee Roth, except Diver Down, it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's very hard to pick.
The originals on Diver Down are great. It was just there's too many covers and it was so short. That's what ticked me off.
Yeah. But that's the thing about Van Halen. All of their albums, there is absolutely no fat. They all sort of tick in, except A Different Kind of Truth, which is more of the modern CD age. But the average duration of the Van Halen album is about 35 to 40 minutes. It's just straight to the point. It's economical, and yeah, I love it. I don't think there's anything in the vault, well, except for live performances. I hear that they used to record a ton of stuff in the David Lee Roth era. Basically, I've heard through the traps that almost every single performance was recorded. So hopefully one day it will get see the light of day and get it out to the public. But Joe, you've seen Van Halen quite a few times. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot, is there a favorite concert performance that you want to share with the audience? I think it'd be nice to, sort of a recollection.
Well, the first time I saw him was Fair Warning, and I'd have to go with that. Although You know what? The 1984 tour was great too. It's hard to say. They played longer with the 1984 tour, and yeah, the reunion I thought was very good, but very sanitized. And Dave wasn't the Dave of old. He didn't jump off the riser and do that. But he did talk a lot. But yeah, probably the first time I saw him on the Fair Warning tour was great. And we saw Valley Bertinelli on the side of the stage. It was cool. So yeah, it was at the old Chicago International Amphitheater. I'd have to go with that show for sure, because that was Van Halen's prime.
Absolutely. And did you notice, was Eddie quite consistent in his technique and what he was bringing to the performance, or did you notice a change, whether it was a decline, or was he fairly consistent all the way through?
Well, back in the 70s, early 80s, you really didn't know. You just, you were just blown away. As far as quality of playing, I think the only time it was really bad was when he did that 2004 tour with Hagar. You noticed that was kind of slop. But I mean, when he came back with Dave, we were just blown away about how, precise he was, especially with the struggles he went through with his addictions and everything. But yeah, I didn't really, it was Eddie Van Halen. He kicked ass, and yeah, but I mean, one story, I have a cousin who went to concerts a couple of years before I did. And that was the story everyone heard. He came back from seeing Black Sabbath, and he would tell me how much they just sucked, and Van Halen just blew him out. He said Van Halen just blew him off the stage, and they walked out halfway through Black Sabbath's set. And I'm like, how can that be? But yeah, that's the way it was. And that's the story that gets repeated over and over.
Yeah, that's gone into urban legend, hasn't it? The old, Van Halen, the upstarts blowing Black Sabbath, the dinosaurs off the stage. Yeah.
Right. And there's the US Festival show, and everybody says that was sloppy. I think that's great. I love it. Like,
I agree. Maybe. Isn't it funny where people say something really sucks, and you look at it and you go, "Am I watching the same show?" I don't know.
I can watch that over and over again. But.
Yeah. JC, did you have any encounters with Van Halen?
Never saw them live. I saw Dave live on a solo, but I never got to see Van Halen live.
Yep. Okay. What about you, John the Music Nut?
Not until Sammy was with the band, and I regret not going to see them with David when they came closer to us later on, when he came back in the band for A Different Kind of Truth. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen it. It's a regret, something I definitely would have wanted to see.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to bring up too is the purists knock Wolfgang, but I'll tell you what, he is a virtuoso, and I just thought he was incredible live. I think he's incredible on this on Different Kind of Truth. So I was not miffed whatsoever that Michael Anthony wasn't with them. I thought he was a great addition, and I loved it.
Yeah, look, but Michael Anthony did add something to the band. I think Eddie described him. He sings like a piccolo, and there's something about the vocals. Like, I think Henry Rollins described Van Halen as a hard rock Beach Boys with those harmonies. So, look, I agree with you completely. I think Wolfgang, virtuoso, very talented, but Michael not being in the band, a little bit disappointing, because I saw them. They played one show in Australia. This was off the back of A Different Kind of Truth, and it's the only time I've ever seen them. And I'm glad I did, because unfortunately a couple of years later Eddie passed away. So, and Wolfgang was playing bass, and the bass was so loud, and it's like somebody on the mixer board had just pushed it up. And I don't know if you've ever, maybe I'm repeating the story, but if you've ever been to a concert where the bass is just so up in the mix, you feel like your whole body is like that. That's what it felt like. But Dan Halen, it was great. I got to see them. I got to see Eddie play. He still hadn't lost his chops. And David Lee Roth was doing the old shooby, a little bit of the Vegas. And I love that. Yeah, some people think it's shtick, but I love it. So I was, felt honored that I was able to see him. Anyway, guys, as always, you bring home the bacon. This has been a fun, fast and furious show. We all agree that Van Halen are the bee's knees. So we've picked out, two of our favorite albums and some honorable mentions. You can see Joe B on his channel.
Waste some time with Average Joe. So I'm just doing it pretty much. And I'll open up a box set. I think I'm going to do the Rat box set this week if I have time.
Fantastic. And also on the Contrarians, My Music Corner. Love that show. John Clauser. Please check it out. And John the Music Nut, Contrarians, My Music Corner, and a lot of other stuff. And don't forget about this channel, this little old channel called Rock Daydream Nation. Please leave your comments and your likes. And the four of us will do a show real soon. Cheers.
Cheers.